Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marley Simmons, and I'm here today with Erin Helland, who is the founder of a company called HardHat Diplomat. She founded about 5 years ago, based in Washington, D.C., that is dedicated to homeowners, empowering homeowners, and helping homeowners make the right decisions and be empowered and educated about decisions to renovate their homes. And that's just one little thing they do that she does and helps from people. She definitely is geared to helping empowering women who need in other parts of the community who might not be as familiar with decisions that need to be made with home ownership and construction. Erin, thank you for joining us today. You've done more than what I just said, but that's the tip of the iceberg. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk first about, we know you're in Washington, D.C. now, but you and I met in Richmond, Virginia. But let's talk about where you grew up and where you come from and how you got to this point is in your life after doing so many different variety of interesting jobs that you've created for yourself. You know, not many people do have so many jobs that they created for themselves. You didn't. I don't feel like you did work for some people, but you've done a lot for yourself.
Okay. I guess I'll start with, I grew up in the middle of the United States in Nebraska, and that's where I spent most of my youth. And then the second half of my life has been out here on the East Coast of the US in Virginia. And for the last nearly 15 years, Washington, D.C. I come from a culturally curious family, and that experience really encouraged me to look beyond being in the Midwest or in the central United States. So at 16, I went on a study abroad through Congress Bundestag exchange program and Youth for Understanding to Magdeburg, Germany. And then at 20, I went on exchange to the Netherlands. And at 23, I embarked on a backpacking trip around the world. And so really, I have to give credit to my family for encouraging that curiosity and that sense of adventure that I had. I think, not a lot of Americans are ready to go abroad, particularly at such a young age. But my family, so my heritage is predominantly Scandinavian on my father's side. On my mother's side is German, Italian. And so I was raised in a very traditionally Italian, large, extensive family. And I have to give credit to my maternal grandparents for introducing that cultural curiosity at such a young age to me, but also for their children. They hosted exchange students from France and beyond when their children were young. And then they were travelers through the Friendship Force, which is an adult exchange program, if you will, where professionals go to other countries. And so when I was young, they were welcoming individuals from Russia, from Italy, from Japan into their home. And so that really exposed me and their children.
So this is why you were a kid, being able to be exposed to this as a kid, meeting different people from around the world.
I was. And so that's when I learned that you play charades and that you can use gestures and share commonalities through food and common rituals like drinking coffee together to find a common ground, even if you can't speak the same language. And I really have to give kudos to them as well for encouraging, like my aunts and uncles have hosted exchange students also from Russia, from Southeast Asia, from Europe. And my parents hosted a young lady from China who I consider to be my sister to this day. And so, I think you mentioned that I've worked in many careers before we talk about like what is construction, but this exposure to intercultural communications and how it can be done either linguistically or otherwise is really the common thread throughout a very non-prescriptive career that I have had.
Yeah. What language? You studied in Germany and the Netherlands. So do you speak both of those languages as well, or?
I do speak both of those languages. I studied Germanic languages in college as part of my international relations background. I have a master's in global marketing management as well. I can remember the day that I was interviewed for this scholarship and I asked someone, do you still use that German language in your everyday life? And when the woman said no, I was so disappointed. And I find out now in my adult life that it's true that without practice, that sometimes you can lose a little bit of the language. Or in studying Germanics, I feel that maybe I'm slightly less fluent than I once was in German, but I am still very much in touch with my German host family. My German exchange sister and her family live in Florida currently. And I just saw my exchange host parents about a month ago. And so I'm forced to practice it because, they make me, and I want to honor them for the experience of teaching me that language. And the Dutch, I think because I had a foundation of German, is still extremely fluent to this day.
Oh, okay, great. And when you traveled the world, as you say, you were backpacking, so you were in your early 20s. And how long of a journey was that?
I went for an entire year.
Wow.
There's something called one-way around the world trip tickets. And you are able to fly into one country, travel by train or by land, and surface in another and continue on. As long as you're moving in one way, you can help control some of the costs that are along with that. So I started.
That's a thing?
Okay. That is a thing. So I started here in the East Coast of the United States, traveled through Europe, went on to Southeast Asia, through Australia, New Zealand, hit South America, and then circled back around. And that was that trip. But since then, I've been to all of the populated continents, if you will.
That sounds amazing. That's like a dream. I only did the Europe backpacking thing in my early 20s and a little bit of Africa, but I met people who were doing that world trip. And so I can't imagine how enriching that is, especially being young. But you had already had the foundation through the people you were meeting growing up with your family, and just I'm sure the curiosity even blossomed more to want to know about the world. When you let's talk real quick, then let's jump to so after this trip, because this is we were talking before where I met you, and here in Richmond, you had a coffee shop, and you said that coffee shop that you started was inspired by your travels. Can you expand on that? How you decided to start a coffee shop and how that was, and how you were starting a business yourself. Had you worked in a coffee shop before, or you just were like, I'm just going to do it?
I had worked in a coffee shop, and that comes from my mother used to take us as children to coffee shops, and I felt so cool because as a young child, you always want to feel more sophisticated or older than you really are. And I just felt so independent to be reading my book or ordering my own beverage. And it was a way to have a sense of community or a third place that wasn't going to the gym, which you don't do as a child. And it was a way to not be stuck in the mold of who you are while you're in elementary school, middle school, or high school. And you could experiment with a different personality, if you will. Okay. I also found that in these travels all around the world, wherever I went, even if I didn't speak the language or if I was having some bit of loneliness or culture shock, I could find a tea house, a coffee house, a cafe, and go in and suddenly feel some sense of ritual, some sense of understanding what I'm supposed to be doing. And oftentimes that's a great way to meet other interesting people. I mean, meeting you at my coffee house. So I also found as a child, when my grandparents would host these international guests, there would always be some sort of beverage ritual. And I felt included. And so that's what I wanted to do by starting the coffee house. Was after my world travels had ended and I was working a corporate day job, I was feeling unfulfilled in how to connect with my community. In the US, we do a lot of volunteer work, but I didn't want to just be serving another party. I also wanted to be engaging with them. And so starting the coffee house, I created it with a mission of coffee, culture, and community. And so that really was, how do I take that experience that I had elsewhere and make someone also feel very included, very welcome, and also get good, tasty beverages?
Yeah. I remember Glow Popper and how, you were very, connected to the community and doing and trying to evolve and do things and meetings and people. Yeah, it was a great place. How the And do you still drink a lot of coffee? Is that like, is coffee still part of your life?
Yes, but I wouldn't say that
you have your favorite coffee shops in DC?
I do, but it would make people worry sometimes if
Yeah.
they knew I had a coffee house. Am I going to judge what it is that they're presenting me if I'm going to their house? And I had to really say, no, for me, it's about the experiential nature of the coffee and not worrying about how did you prepare it for me and is it going to be that delicious. I very much enjoy still that ritual. I think that happens in our professional realm of, would you like to meet for coffee? If you think about that way of connecting when you're meeting someone outside of your home, you're taking it outside of a business setting. I just really love that experience.
Tell us about, so at that time that you had another corporate, you mentioned you had a corporate day job that you were doing at the same time. And then I know that you had also, worked with cross-cultural immersions and human resources. You worked at Kings Dominion, Kings Dominion, which is an amusement park. So at a park where there's tons of rides. And what was your role there? And when was that in your life? When was that in between?
So I suppose that I need to make this relevant to an audience that, having lived in former Eastern Germany, I'm familiar with, like, when you are young, you think about what your career is. Are you going to apprentice somewhere? Are you going to go on a journeyman's path? Are you going through the university path? But what you do is what you do. And I think that my career path can sound very chaotic to those who can't figure out what the common thread is. And ultimately, from my youth on, my common thread has been interfacing with people and taking that intercultural communications and placing that into the leadership roles that I have done, even though they cross a broad spectrum of things. So yes, I worked in the corporate sphere in international healthcare. And then I worked in youth exchange. So for an international nonprofit called Youth for Understanding, doing international education and cultural exchange programs. And then I wanted to also to be involved in my local community. So while I was in college, I also worked off and on full time. Yes, I worked at Kings Dominion and amusement park in human resources. But the common thread is I was teaching cultural orientations for the hospitality work exchange program, which was comprised of predominantly Eastern European guests. And I'll never forget the day I walked through the park. I needed to have a conversation with one of our guest workers where there was some cultural misunderstanding and the American management didn't know exactly how to address something with sensitivity. But as I was walking through the park, here I heard a young lady from Poland in the whack-a-mole game stand where you hit the moles popping up from the hole.
Oh yeah, you hit the things coming up, right?
Yes, and it was such a culturally amazing moment where I thought, I love my job, because here I hear this woman who comes from a place where she probably hadn't done hospitality to this level before, and she's saying, "Come on, everybody, step up and whack that mole."
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I love this job so much because it ties into that Americanism of like, hey, how are you? And for us, it's just like saying hello, where in other cultures, it's very bothersome to hear someone say, hey, how are you? And not want to actually hear what your life is.
Right.
Kind of continuing on in other like work local things. I did the coffee house. And then now these days, I still do local engagement through economic development programs, where we do work to help small businesses in low to moderate economic development corridors. And then, yes, about 5 years ago, I started HardHat Diplomat. And that was really born of my own home disaster chaos experience. But you can also see from the name HardHat Diplomat, I really wanted to draw in all of that travel and study abroad experience, work in public diplomacy. It's something that it's always going to stay with me in some line through the career.
The name of your company is great. It's perfect for knowing you and for knowing what the mission of the company is. And so let's talk about that HardHat Diplomat. And and how you got started. You said you got started through your own personal experience with situations with your home that needed repair. But you also mentioned that you grew up with that your dad also was like he was very I don't know if his job was construction or if it was he was aware of construction, and just like my father's very handyman, you would say, someone who's always fixing things. So it helps you not be as, have as much fear when you see someone do
Absolutely.
it in front of you a lot, rather than, oh no, why is that door creaking? How do I fix that? I have no idea, So
Yes.
yeah, tell us how that you came up with this idea. How did this?
So I will preface with, yes, I am the daughter of a Class A contractor, but he was an estimator for many years on new housing builds, and then sometimes on large community buildings, retail buildings. And eventually he started his own business at the same time that I had started my coffee house. So he built out the coffee house with me.
Okay.
He was extremely handy around our house growing up, but my mother would argue that there is a phrase, the cobbler's children has no shoes, because
Yes.
projects in any contractor's home are the last thing to get done, because they're
Yes.
focused on serving the client, and so they come home and that's the last thing that they want to do. And I would say that through osmosis and joining him on the excitement of what his vision for projects were and helping in small capacities. I do wish that I were more hands-on when I was younger, but I also was so focused on this. I want to travel and see the world and speak other languages. But really connecting back to that came from when I purchased a home in 2017. Within 30 days of buying it, someone destroyed it. It was a complete accident, but I had put an advertisement out that I had a duplex. So a duplex, the one that I had is where I had my apartment upstairs and I had a rental unit downstairs. And he had actually come to help me renovate, fix up the downstairs to be ready to rent. And then it was time for me to move on to my unit. And I had someone through this advertisement come to remove the cabinets, but they accidentally, or didn't really know what they were doing as they were pulling it, pulled off the water shutoff valve to the second story kitchen sink. So it blew out the back door, and suddenly it was like a fire hydrant of water exploding in the kitchen, running down through the hall of the upstairs. And then what does that mean? It's so much water, it's flowing to the downstairs unit. So it was raining, just pouring down rain through the electrical light fixtures of the downstairs. And when I went down, I watched the walls just cave in, just buckle. So within 30 days of buying my home, ultimately I was faced with a gut job. And so while it was devastating in the moment, I then had to kind of put on my project manager hat and think, how am I going to move forward with this? And that really is the impetus for how HardHat Diplomat came to be, because I would call my mother, I would call my father and ask for advice, or sometimes just I needed to vent. I needed an outlet, particularly as a single woman who was working with contractors who I felt had the upper hand. The power dynamic shifts when you are giving someone money to work on your home. And if you haven't done your homework and your research to know how much should this cost, where can these materials be sourced, what are the alternatives to what they are telling me, it can feel daunting. And I felt like I recognized through this experience, luckily I had a lot of background and I had a resource to call, that others need this experience. And I find that most people actually have the capacity and the capability to do their home improvement projects, be it DIY or to successfully work with a contractor without being taken advantage of. But they have to go into it prepared with a baseline knowledge, and also to not go in it from being the underdog. They have to recognize that you need to be informed enough to not be taken advantage of. But contractors are humans too. They also have families. They also take pride in the work that they do. And it's so much better to go into a project informed and ready to collaborate than with this defensive posture.
And I know, I feel like, and as a woman too, like sometimes these type of things where majority of people working in the field are men, you have this sort of just barrier where maybe it's just assumed you as a woman know absolutely nothing about any of this construction business. So and therefore sometimes, yes, it is easily could be taken advantage of in those situations without knowing your options and without knowing. And but it's a very there's so many decisions to be made. So I know that your company definitely is you mentioned on your website, it's just like definitely highlighting empowering women. It's not just for women, but it's for, you try to, that's to your outreach. And how did, like, you also with your project, what you do, you can talk about more about what you do. You have like courses, you have workshops, and you do private consulting. Who are some of the people that who call you for private consulting or come to your workshops?
So naturally, I have an audience of women. Something that I like to point out is that here in the US, single women purchase homes at twice the rate of single men. So of course, couples have an easier time buying homes, but then after that, single women are really investing in this. Sometimes you can consider it a financial asset or security, but really they are purchasing homes. And why is that? Why are they doing that at such a rate? And I think some of it comes back to, we may be a very progressive country, but it was not until the mid 1970s that a woman could take out a loan or a credit card and have her name as the primary purchaser of a home. There had to be a man involved. And so I think that has been part of the influence of why we're seeing more women in this. And so for that very reason, women haven't traditionally been encouraged to be the person doing the home improvement or making the calls and making the decisions. And so it can still happen that someone will say, is your husband home? Or what does your husband think about this? Or if they recognize that it may be a single woman that they're dealing with, saying, do you have a boyfriend? and that creates an unusual dynamic before that person has walked in the door. But if you can treat it more as a business transaction where you've done a little bit of homework and you can articulate what it is that you want and what your boundaries are financially, timeline wise, maybe what accommodations you may need. So my audience, while I do serve women, also there's a lot of young men these days who work in IT office jobs, and they haven't had someone that coaches them through hands-on, or really those who are vulnerable, people with health issues or disabilities, minorities, immigrants, anyone who feels that automatically someone may talk to them in a different way. And so really that's where my coaching service comes in, is to help these individuals prepare themselves to be at a more even level and to know what to expect and what they can also request and ask for. Conversely, I also work with a lot of contractors who are so grateful that there's an outlet for them as well. They can contact me. Some people say you're like a therapist for us in the construction industry, because our spouses may not understand the challenges that we go through, be that with cash flow, with demanding clients, with materials and availability, or subcontractors showing up or not. And same for homeowners who say, my significant other is completely hands off, or I need to talk to someone who can help me understand, how do I navigate having these contractors in my home when I have children? How do I keep them safe?
Do you have, can you share like share any specific stories of projects that you've seen through, or like how typically, how long do you work with someone, if you've consulted someone? Is it like a one-off thing, or do you work with them over a few months? Or
so I wish that I could do this work where money would not be involved, because my motivations really, I really just want to help people get through this. We know that more than 60% of homes in the US need some sort of modest upgrade or improvement, and at least 80% need some sort of major system overhaul. So if you are not an expert in the home renovation or construction industry, you can already feel like, you're at a disadvantage. And that's a lot of people, and I can't serve them all, right? So what I try to do is figure out how can I reach as many people in a way that is affordable across a spectrum. And so I offer an online course that's relevant pretty much to anyone in the world, because it is all about that project management mindset and what you can do to better approach your project, how you define the scope, the budget, the timeline, your personal boundaries, the physical boundaries. I mean, you want to run your home as if you are the employer, right? This is their job site. So this is if you are an employer. So how to get into that mindset. So the course covers that. You can watch it on demand in your own time, do some worksheets. I like the workshops that are done in person. That's my favorite, but I can't be everywhere at all time. I did just have a workshop here in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, and it was really nice to see that they were starting to see how project management, even if you're not a project manager in your career, to manage a household as a stay-at-home parent, you have to organize the schedules of your child and what their extracurriculars are, and your spouse, and maybe the pet, and your own well-being. And so even if you're just doing household management, you have all the tools and resources you need to translate into being successful when it comes to embarking on a renovation or construction journey in home improvement. Then I do one-offs. So I have quick calls that someone can schedule with me through my site. And those are touchdowns of, here's an example. Erin, it is raining inside of my electrical panel. Is my house going to catch on fire? Am I safe to stay inside it? I'm really scared right now.
Wow.
And if this happens on a weekend or a holiday, so I'll pick up the phone and I'll guide them through. I'll help them know what to touch or not touch to give me some feedback, and help them understand, like, it's probably that there's a hole on the exterior of your house where the line of the electrical is coming in, but don't open the panel, don't expose anything. Use your house as you would. I ask things like, do you have homeowners insurance that may tie in if there is a bigger issue? But reassurance in that moment. I've had other people say the same thing. My basement is flooding. It's flooding right now. What do I do? And so I give them short-term solutions and ideas of who to call, what the price range might be. That's a quick call. And then there's those who are doing huge additions to their homes. They love the neighborhood that they're in. They can't afford a mortgage and the cost of moving to a new location. So ultimately they decide that they want to stay where they're at and do a renovation. So we talk about the scope of, I had clients that wanted to go up and build out their attic space, but the load would not have been accepted by their home. But they had a huge backyard. So I said, if you can lose some of this backyard space, you have room for an entire addition for your family. And so I was with them throughout the duration of their entire project. Sometimes I'll talk people through. We look at, I use that intercultural communication to interpret this nebulous idea in their head of what they want into words that are translated for the contractor to define the scope of work. This is what I want. And particularly if it's someone who's looking for more creative, they don't just want a facelift on what already exists, but they might want to take walls down and know if they can get in new features into their home.
Right. So they can be, because like if I think about that for myself or my mother, who's always doing things like she can always ask her, my dad, like what is possible here? Because you don't even really know if you're not familiar with, well, can I just knock that wall down and we'll be good? And I was like, no, wait a minute, that wall's a support. You can't do that. And so, okay. So you're very, this is amazing that this is a very cool thing. Is there anything like this? Have you found any other businesses models like this that you could model off of, or feel like I've never heard of anything like this before? So
when I started, it was a whole debate. Do I call myself a consultant? Am I a coach? How does this work? And also part of that imposter syndrome that women get sometimes. I felt like, do I truly know enough to be guiding people through this? But a lot of what I'm doing is emotional support, creativity, helping people overcome decision fatigue when they have to think of all the parts that go into this. And I found that when I started this, there really wasn't but one or two other people in the United States that I could find that identified as a home improvement or renovation coach. There have always been handymans out there that are willing to guide homeowners, but they're one often harder to find. I can say in the recent years, it has become slightly more popular to have services where you're advising, but for me, truly, I am not the general contractor. I'm not going in and performing the work for the individuals. I am an unbiased advocate. I am really there to help you get the best outcome. So we're really kind of raw and transparent too. Like, what are your dream visions that you want? Because sometimes people limit what they think can be done in the house. And so if we start from the dream, there's more possibilities. Then we go into, what is your budget and your financial capacity? Where could you potentially get funds from? And then that will help us hone in a little on what is possible. And then what are the other variables or factors? Is there emergency work to be done? Like in my house where it was flooding. I mean,
that's emergency.
Water is insidious. When there was water coming through, that can create health issues, right? So teams come in and start ripping down your walls immediately. Or is it you have a parent who has a health issue now, and now you're going to have a multi-generational home. How do you modify your home to help them be safe or age in place? A lot of us are now starting to stay longer in our homes. So what can we do? So those kinds of factors come into play. So it's money, is what is your circumstance? And as you mentioned with the structural walls, like what is the capacity of the home itself?
Right. Do you have, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what is your typical, like, because this is not a 9 to 5. This is not a normal schedule of work. And especially when you work for yourself, you're sort of always working. There's never, I mean, you could always be working. When you have your own business, I feel like that's what you do all the time, is work for yourself. But what is a typical, like, day or week look like for you? A typical, if there is such a thing, like, and also how do you reach out to people? Do you obviously you have these workshops that I'm sure you advertise, but how do you meet people and stuff like that?
Having a website has been tremendously important, and I have been reluctantly engaging more and more in things like SEO for organic reach, where I'm programming in keywords for people to be able to find me, social media. And I don't love putting my face out there and taking the time to create those videos, but I find that begets more interest in what I do. A lot of what happens is just word of mouth, particularly through the workshops, or when we have these statistics of how many individuals need to do work on their home. When the emergency hits, when their heating and cooling system suddenly no longer works, when a pipe has burst in their home, when the grill outside has caught fire to their deck, and now they have to embark on these projects. That's when they start looking for, how do I start a home renovation help? And so a lot of my business comes organically from those who find me. A typical day. Well, first I have to say I have better boundaries about being an entrepreneur because of my experience with the coffee house. That was open 7 days a week. It had an operational schedule, but of course you also have deliveries. You have your administrative work that has to be done. And I had a fabulous team that could, over time, take certain roles over. Through HardHat Diplomat, I'm kind of a one-woman show. So I have to determine, when can I elect to or afford to outsource certain responsibilities, be that accounting or marketing, or in the course instance, having a production team help put together something slightly more professional. One of the other things I have to be mindful of is, and we women do this a lot, I have to not worry about being perfect, right? It's better to make sure that the information gets out there and I can always work on it on the back end. So that's really how my day goes, is checking on my website. Is there anything I need to update regarding classes or workshops? Have I done something on social media that markets those things? Or am I at least resharing things of interest, particularly with regard to women in the trades or interesting design and layout options and techniques? Sometimes hands-on home maintenance things that I find others are teaching that are quite interesting. And then I dive into projects. So sometimes I have phone calls where I am assisting a contractor on a large project, particularly if they are a boutique or smaller firm. So I'm taking that more office type background that I have, and I'm applying it to others in the industry and helping bring them up a level. And then I'm talking to homeowners. I'm taking those consulting calls. I try to schedule them into like a 3-day window unless it's an emergency, so that I really know what's happening each day of the week. And I truly set boundaries. Unfortunately, my work calls come onto the same phone as my personal calls, and sometimes I forget to turn that off. I may have lost you, Marlies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's so what are the biggest I'm here.
I heard, what are the biggest?
We got each other?
Yes.
How about so this is, you've done doing all this for yourself. I'm just so impressed. And also, like, let's talk about, I mean, we've sort of hit on this as well, but like the importance for you and all the challenges you've had through all these different careers and projects, like the importance of perseverance and resilience of leadership, like how you as a how you came to be in that leadership position. Like, what did you learn? How did you grow as a person? And how did you, overcome those daily, just like the little thing you just said, like, this isn't perfect, but I have to keep going and we have to run with it, or just like insecurities, or it's a little personal, but like, how do you?
I guess I've never been asked that question or thought of it in this way, but I think it ties back to that intercultural communications. When you are plunked into another country and you cannot speak the language, you need to find alternative ways of communicating instead of just saying yes. Yes, sometimes we do that. But I think from that experience of using other formats, so gestures and really, truly listening. When you can't speak, you have to listen more. And I think that taught me a lot about reading between the lines, listening to things that are being implied, but maybe not directly stated. And I believe that has been a core of what has developed my leadership capacity and what I use when I train others in leadership environments, be that for their fiscal governance or how they engage with the community. It just comes down to listening to people and sometimes removing yourself from your opinion and where you're coming from. So when you say, like, how do you manage the chaos or the feeling that you could be taken advantage of, or that feeling of being overwhelmed, you try to put yourself in the other person's position. And what are you providing them or not that could enhance the communication? Because really, ultimately, all these problems that we have come from misfires in communication and shaping expectations. And how can you better engage with the party that you're working with?
Okay. Awesome. Well, it's it's challenging for sure. I've got a couple of questions here, so I'm going to jump over here. Question: some of your marketing for HardHat Diplomat is focused on women. Does the workshop dynamic change when you have both men and women in your workshop?
So this is my 6th year in business, and I have taught these workshops all across the US. And so they've been marketed in many different ways. They have been marketed as for women, or just in general for new homeowners or people looking. Some of the workshops I do really are open. But when I talk about that this was originally a business that was created and designed to meet the experience of women, but that we are open to all genders, I think that introduces the men that come to understanding that they are welcomed to participate, but that they are not the dominant force. And I really think that it has shaped the expectation of who comes and how they come in, because I think sometimes there's this expectation that you come in as a man being masculine and of authority and already knowing a lot of this stuff. And so the men that come and join us in these workshops, they're there to listen and they're there to learn. And they're also there to be vulnerable and know that it's a very safe space to be. I would say when I do some of my hands-on workshops, about 40% are men. And sometimes it's my wife sent me and said, I need to be here.
My wife sent me. That's pretty funny. Okay, another question. Incredible statistic about how many more single women buy homes than single men. Why do you think that is?
I think some of it harkens back to what I touched on before about women not having access to purchase opportunities, to not having the ability to get a mortgage or put their name on the title of the home. And it may also come from historically, because of the way that we are encouraged or not in our past. Home is something that we create and that is fairly approachable. Like, you want to have a safe space, you want to have a sanctuary, and you know how to create that space. Whereas investing your money in other ways may require more of that research or education. And so I think the internet has really leveled the playing field a little bit more, but I still think that it's because a home is a tangible thing. Investing in a car, we know, is maybe not the same amount of investment. It's going to depreciate over time. Investing in stock exchanges can be riskier and may involve more research. Whereas if you like this place, you're going to make it your home, and you're going to hope that over time it will still retain its value, or can be a safe place for anyone in your family to return back to.
Cool. Did you, let me see, one more question. Can you talk about some of your clients who had a transformation in the way that they approached their renovation? What are some of the biggest changes you have seen in your clients?
Most of my workshops, I will send a survey after. Okay. And I ask them at the onset what their concerns are so that we can make sure to touch on it. And then I send the survey after a few days requesting what information did they want more of, what could I change about the time, but also to give a statement or a testimonial. And what I hear most is, I now know I can do this, or I have the confidence to do this.
Your confidence booster. Your confidence booster.
I hope to reduce the anxieties that go along with it, just really to be the champion or the cheerleader to help you launch this project. But I've also had clients that say, I have reached the point where I suspect that things are not going as they should. And that power dynamic, because you gave a bunch of money up front and the project's moving along, and then kind of in the instance that happened to me, contractors started not showing up for days at a time or saying they would. And then there's only one individual on site doing the work versus a whole crew. And I'm not getting timeline updates. And, my father, when he was serving as my renovation coach at that time, said, well, would you ever recommend this person to another friend of yours to do work for them? And I said, absolutely not. And he said, well, that's your answer right there. And so that helped me. I think sometimes I help clients step out of bullying behavior or behavior where they're being ignored, to help them draw the line between being patient, because yes, contractors are humans too. There are disruptions to the schedule that can be beyond anyone's control, be it something happened to the contractor and their family and their health, to materials are not arriving on time. But if you're not receiving communication, then that's not very fair to you as the homeowner. And so I do help and get a lot of testimonials from individuals that say, I felt through you empowered to confront my contractor, which is very difficult for conflict avoiders, and say, I have assessed the situation and I recognize at this point that we are not in a fair scenario. And I want to work with you to either have that addressed according to my needs in this timeline so that we can continue our working relationship, or to move forward and beyond this relationship, terminating our contract and allowing me to move forward with someone else. So I have very specific examples of that where you must terminate the relationship with the contractor, or where you're course correcting throughout, or where they really feel like they have the confidence and they'll come. I have had many people reach out to me over the years and say, I just want you to know, I am so happy with the kitchen that I have now. Like, it's functional. You gave also the encouragement that I could create this in the way that I want, not in drab, boring colors and selections for selling it in the future, but you helped me assess that this is the home I'm going to stay in for the next 10 to 15 years based on all the other factors in my life. And so for that reason, I'm going to build it into the kitchen of my dreams that I'm going to love, and not worry about, will that diminish my return on investment when it comes time to sell?
Empowerment. This is a great follow-up question. Do you think the project management skills you help people create affect other parts of their lives? I'd say yes.
I think that sometimes we all need a reminder. Honestly, I will go and I will watch my own course sometimes just to have a pep talk on projects that I'm going to embark on, particularly if it's going to be a large financial investment. One of my personal things always is, what if there's scope creep? What if there's something that is not visible to me that is found? I need to have a contingency. So I want to be very clear about that. And so I sometimes go and do that just for myself, and that's with my renovation projects. But I think the same thing that we have, where at the opening of this, I mentioned, like, if you are a homemaker, you are project managing everyone in your home, let alone if you also have a career that you're managing or extracurriculars, like you're involved in sports or you are serving on a board of an organization. I believe that sometimes what I am teaching is just reinforcement or reminder of, oh yes, everything I do is translatable. And that's where, like, my career feeling hodgepodge and all over the place actually has a thread of commonality throughout. And I believe that that's the aha moment that people get when they realize, oh, project management from this other thing also applies to my home, also applies beyond my home to how I manage relationships.
Wow. So then you're going to next be a marriage counselor. Just kidding. Okay. Well, I got a great question. Will you ever run HardHat Diplomat workshops in other countries?
Well, I would absolutely be open to it as someone who's thrilled about it. Typically that comes from, what sort of sponsorship do I have in support to go there physically? That would be my number one preference. But, virtually is always an option.
Well, you've got the name. The name's ready to go. The name is ready to go abroad and be working with it could be with people of the other country, or it could be specific Americans building their homes remotely, and you meet with let's find another way for you to travel the world.
Well, absolutely. You want to involve other home-centric professionals, be it a real estate agent, a contractor, anyone who's tangentially involved, a designer, an architect, a landscape architect. I love doing workshops where I have those individuals come in so that no one's hearing me talk on and on for the whole day. But yeah, if there's opportunity, I'm all about it.
All right. We'll keep that in mind. Another question. What is the number one strategy for overcoming anxiety, parentheses, related to home improvement projects, of course, you give at your workshops? Doing
your homework first. So 80% of people will pick up the phone and call a contractor before they have done any research of their own. Maybe they have gone online and see inspirational pictures, but really, if you do your homework and you do your research, that will reduce your anxiety, because if you're calling the contractor and inviting them to do an assessment and tell you what your project is and how much it costs, then you have handed all the authority over to them. And that is what makes you anxious.
Mm-hmm.
If you are doing the research and you can clearly define, this is what I want to do, this is roughly how much I can spend or I'm willing to spend, this is when I would like to do it, then already you are taking over the power and the control of defining what your project is. And I think that's a huge component to reducing anxiety.
Doing your homework. And that's, I mean, you would think it's kind of easier now with Google and just searching and AI even maybe. Oh yeah, do you use AI? Is that any part of your business format yet?
I got a lot of groans on Saturday's workshops when I was sharing with individuals some of the platforms that they can use to collect and organize these thoughts that they have, be it from like Google Docs, where you are recording things, to Pinterest. And then I talked about Spoke, which is like an internal or an interior design program where you can collect products that you like and you can do layouts. And then I said, and nowadays we have AI as well. And so I think there's a program called Midjourney where people can start to give prompts and cues to the technology to articulate their vision in a visual format.
It's an AI. It's an AI tool called Midjourney.
Yes, I have not used it myself yet. You will see it all over. I definitely think there's a lot of ways that you can have these external systems do it, but it's always best to initiate from defining your wants, your needs, your big fixes, your little fixes. And if you weren't stuck in this home that you're in, what would your dream item be? Because there might be a way that the contractor can be creative and incorporate that in for you if you just share why you're doing your project and what you hope to achieve.
Okay, one more question here before we wrap things up. What are some valuable lessons you've learned from your personal home renovation experiences? And that might be a long question to answer, but if you can briefly expand on that, your personal home renovation experiences, what you've learned valuable?
Well, from the incident, I ended up going to home inspector school. So I learned a lot of technical things as well. But I think what happens is we get hung up on the technical components. And I find that my business now centers on the emotional realities that come in from a home renovation. So there is decision fatigue. You are making a lot of decisions in a very quick way about, tile, what type of floor, what color, what pattern is it being laid in, what finish and fixtures are you getting? And so I think that helping people get organized and realizing how much emotional drain can go into this and planning and preparing for that is really what I take away as my personal home renovation experience takeaway is you need to have a support network. You get bogged down with, you've got your whole life that you're trying to manage, and now you've got this whole disruption to your sanctuary space. Be sure to have outlets with your family, with your friends, to be able to go out to dinner together or to go to a movie or do something that takes your mind off of constantly thinking about this project.
Awesome. Well, you've had such great advice, and we're at the end of Women's History Month, and wanted to, we're highlighting women and their accomplishments. Especially, you have such a great journey, and I'm so grateful that you were able to share that with us today. I have, we've known you for a little while, and it's been just great to see all these awesome things you're doing and empowering yourself and empowering the community. And it's very inspiring, I have to say. So thank you for joining us, Erin.
Thank you for having me.
Erin, maybe we'll see you around the world, everybody. HardHat Diplomat is the name of Erin's company that she founded. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you for your questions, and check the event schedule on the website American Center in Moscow for the next event. Coming soon tomorrow. I will be here again tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Erin.